Thanks, Phil. Hi, everyone. Just a slight change, because this is being recorded, not head of change at Coutts, which is great you think that, a consultant at Coutts. So it's really interesting to hear the previous two talks, actually, a lot of similarities between what I'm about to say and what those have said. I guess, where do I start? So I always knew it was going to be interesting at Coutts when I was promoted on my first day. So this speaks nothing of my ability, despite the flattering reference before, but I was, I guess, the victim or beneficiary of circumstance. So there I was, I just logged into my PC, I got a coffee, and I was reading through some project documentation when my new boss came over. And she said to me, hi, have you got time for a quick catch up? We've had a bit of a change here. We need a new project manager. You've led some teams before. How do you fancy leading this team? So I've been brought in as a slightly more specialist resource on the team. I'd heard in the short time I've been there that the project had some difficulties. The usual sorts of things we'd be familiar with. So some personality clashes in the team, some misaligned stakeholder expectations, and some slipped project timelines. Sure, I said, sounds great. So there I was the new project manager. Oh, and we need to be more agile, she says to me. Oh, and we need to be more agile. So the title of my talk this evening is The Journey Towards Agile Adoption at one of the world's oldest banks. I think the key word to stress here is journey. I can't promise that Agile is where we'll end up, but let's see where we get to. So a bit of history first. Coutts was founded in 1692 and has been a pretty innovative business ever since its launch. So it started as a goldsmith banker, which was a term I didn't know until I'd looked it up. Goldsmiths back in the 17th century responded to their client needs and pivoted their business models to unite into one business function, the activities of safe deposits, lending money, transferring money between different towns and different people, and trading in foreign exchange. This became banking. The paperwork and record keeping of these activities led to important innovations in banking later on, such as banknotes and checks. Technologies, I guess you can call them, which remain with us over 300 years later. Sort of closer to the present day, Coutts remained innovative. It was the first British bank to fully automate its general ledger. And then in the modern day, it was the first private bank to launch Touch ID for its clients on mobile devices, a real focus on data security there. It hosts an award-winning online banking platform. And as with the way it conducts its business, it does it with sort of an air of sophistication and understatement that you might expect from an old British institution. The point of this is that it's an innovative business, but there are also high expectations when delivering change into the business. And the expectation was the same when it came to Agile adoption. Now, despite my boss's casual remark, Coutts Private Banking had been planning an Agile adoption for some time. Coutts is owned by the RBS Group, which when I joined was undergoing its second attempt at divesting 300 branches as part of the sort of a condition of the bailout that it received from the government in the wake of the financial crisis. Now, the very public progress of this program meant that there was a real focus within the group to speed up delivery and increase its efficiency. And private banking change management had decided to do an Agile adoption and had booked its project managers and BAs and some executives onto Scrum Master training. So fast forward a month, we've all been trained, we've all played with the Lego, we've got our certificates, we're all newly minted Scrum Masters, and we're led off into the business to begin making things happen quicker. So Coutts head office is, I don't know if any of you have seen it or ever been in there, but it's a beautiful old building. It's on the Strand, and it's structured in the shape of a castle, triangular castle, but a castle. So it's got high walls, it's got big towers, It's got sort of old pictures and some new ones are internally on the walls, and it's got carp swimming around in a pool in the middle of the big atrium. So it's a really interesting place. They have the staff meeting rooms in the tower, so you can be sat around a big circular table, feeling away from some sort of design studio. Just shortly after my training, I was running my next project board in one of these rooms, and the ask was clear. So we'd been given, the challenge was we had to launch a new proposition, we had to design it, build it, test it, and launch it onto one of our existing customer investment platforms within 3 months. So the only way we were ever going to do this was to flex our new Agile skills and go with an Agile delivery. So I agreed it with my project sponsor. This is the way we were going to go. What did I do next? So I took a proposal to that project board on how we were going to make all this happen. So I wanted a product owner, somebody who was empowered to take decisions on the key functionality that would be important to our clients and commercially beneficial. I wanted SMEs who were embedded within our project team and were empowered to make decisions and do it quickly. We had a dedicated working space, something not dissimilar to this, albeit not in the Coutts main office, where I asked for co-location. I wanted everybody working together to have the same sort of communication that's been spoken about this evening, everybody talking together and feeding back. We planned a series of sprints, daily stand-ups, retrospectives, and the real icing on the cake for our stakeholders was a series of show and tell sessions where they could actually see what we were producing rather than hear about it through a status report. So it was great. Nods around the table, everybody was bought in, there was a call to action from my project sponsor, and we were off. That's it, we're on our way to implementing Agile. So later that day, just before I went home, I sent out the first round of meeting invites for our first sprint. And I've got to say, after that, gave myself a little pat on the back, as you might say, it had all gone well. And I was thinking, just for a brief moment, how am I going to describe myself after this project? Am I a Scrum Master or am I more of an Agile coach? So, it was going so well. And then, and then the responses started coming back from the meeting invites. So the first one, declined. The second one, can't do daily meetings. Can they be weekly instead? The third one, Lucy can be embedded within your product team. That's great, but she has to refer back to me for decisions. The third one from a senior guy in technology, definitely don't like the word backlog. Makes us look bad. Please change. And more besides. So it hadn't got off to a flying start. But I could understand it, right? There were concerns across the board. We were looking at a new type of, a new change methodology. Excuse me. It was a new change methodology. It required much more regular time commitment. It was alien to a lot of people. And we were essentially, the view was we were trying to use a software development methodology on a business change project in a highly regulated industry. Now, for those of you who might not know, you'll be so familiar with financial services. Banking, in banking, compliance and legal contacts have a really important role to play, and they have a very strong voice and a good seat at the table. So their primary role is to protect customers and to de-risk the operations of the bank. But they're very detail-oriented, and they can spend a lot of time debating very minor, or what seem to be very minor points. I don't want to do them any disservice. So the wording, like the value of your investments can go down as well as up, would have had months of debate. Now, typically, they would be brought in at the end of a project to review your design, or at the end of a phase of a project to review your designs after you've created them. But for us to achieve our 3-month timeline, it was important. We had to have them in the room. So they were the guys I needed there the most. But we had committed. Oh, I think it's gone. We had committed to. We had committed to this 3-month timeline, a challenging timeline anyway, and we'd also. Thank you. We'd also then committed to trying to implement a new change methodology at the same time. So it was a real challenge. But we committed to doing it, so we got on with it. So my next step, called the head of technology, is technology is our big partner in this project, and technology is the seat of Agile, right? So I thought he's going to understand and he's going to help me out. And I said, look, can we have more regular releases? Can we at least have code deployed into a test environment so that we can see where we've got to and we can start to iterate in that way? And he laughed at me. He said, John, so you actually want to do Agile? I thought you just wanted to be more Agile. So this hadn't got off to a flying start. He said, no, we're linked into our core systems. You have to stick to the release schedule. But we got on with it. As the project progressed, I worked with 2 of our external suppliers. And one was a financial technology company, one was a design agency. Both used to working in an Agile way. They came with all the Agile tools and the terminology, and I thought, this is great. They're going to help us to take the business on the journey. Unfortunately, it didn't work out like that. One of them wouldn't begin work until we had a completely signed off set of documents. The other had committed resources elsewhere, so actually wasn't able to incorporate feedback as quickly as we would have liked. And on top of that, I couldn't get either of them to co-locate with us and sit in the room. So that was really frustrating. My team as well, we were very enthusiastic about the move to Agile, but it was challenging for them. So they, the most obvious example are the business analysts. It can be an excruciating transition for a detail-oriented business analyst to who's used to going into the finer points of a process flow and the underlying thinking, to keep their daily update to 3 succinct points. But they managed it. At the other extreme, we had some stakeholders who were such Agile enthusiasts. They just wanted to keep on responding to change. They wanted to keep on iterating, keep on going back to clients, keep on changing the designs, possibly putting any product launch at risk. By the end of the first sprint, I knew we were in trouble and I had raised a risk to my project board. By the end of the second, I could see we need a miracle to make this work. Now the third sprint, and for those Agile, true Agile practitioners, this might make you wince a little. I extended the third sprint twice. I was desperate to get the work done, but I also wanted to see if anybody would notice. No, and they didn't. That's fine. It was all new. So there we were. I mean, things hadn't been going great. But then there was a surprise. So so commentators in the banking and financial technology space are fond of saying that banks will have their market share eroded by sort of smaller, faster, more innovative competitors because of their dependency on legacy systems and processes and lack of response to customer feedback. But what I then saw at the lowest point of our project was a real sense of optimism in our team. In our project board, our stakeholders were showing the spirit of these 17th century goldsmiths and modern day startups, and they decided to pivot themselves. So we went from a proposition design which clearly had some challenges in Coutts, and we decided to launch it into NatWest. Won't go into the details of the structure, but we operate across the group from our team. And so we decided to go across the group. So this was going to be a huge amount of change. So we had to scrap the code. We had to go back out to clients with a new prototype, which required new UX, new UI, new content. It required months more work. And then, of course, going into a new business, we had a completely different set of stakeholders. It's, you've got one compliance contact, one legal contact, etc. And now you've got 2 of them, all with different views and so on. So potentially, a very challenging time. But I thought this might be a really good opportunity for us to kind of, extend the Agile experiment. Sounds really negative, this story. Unfortunately, it wasn't. NatWest has millions of customers, has hundreds of branches, and it has kind of dozens of systems, layers of security and governance, which which keeps a business of that size very secure. And if you want to launch a new service into the NatWest mainframe ecosystem, whatever you want to call it, you have to go through a series of identifying all the departments who might be impacted by this, attending mancos and steercos and operational planning boards, seeking everybody's comments and approval, and then getting to the stage where everybody approves it. If only one of them fails to respond within your allocated time frame, you have to go back and start all over again. And it's sort of symptomatic of other processes in the business. It's all there for a reason, but it doesn't necessarily fit with the Agile approach. Further, to release the actual code, there's a lead time of up to a month after you've finished testing, and that time includes an independent review which takes place behind closed doors. Now, if you're trying to bring people on your journey towards Agile and you don't even know who they are, your chances are dead in the water. So, but the final nail in the coffin was when we had to make a fairly minor release for the tax year end. And we updated, we sort of got ready to go for the go, no-go decision. We had everything ready to go. We had all our epics and our user stories and all the work tracked through Jira, which was one of the successes of our project. And then realised that with days to go that it didn't fit the governance model of the bank, of NatWest. So we had to create dozens of pages of paperwork, essentially copying what was in Jira, go through, get those signed off, and then go through 3 stage gates retrospectively to be able to launch. It's fair to say at this point, this was the end of our Agile plan. We were a bit defeated. We had failed to do co-location. We had reams of paperwork and governance to go through, and stakeholders were no longer talking about Agile. It was it felt like a bit of a failure. And then a few months ago, we were planning the next phase of our project. We're launching another proposition, and we all sat around the table, and a funny thing happened. So we started with our user-centric design. That was first on the table. And we went with, after that, we went with a series of sprints to iterate the designs and get those back out to clients. We decided we needed SMEs in the room who could work with us, sit around the table and give us instant feedback. And so we worked with their line managers and got buy-in ahead of time this time for them to work with us. And we had new suppliers working with us, and they've agreed from the off to come in and sit in the room. And all of this sounds familiar, but the important point here is that we hadn't called it Agile to ourselves. It was just how we'd begun to think. Which we found really interesting. And then we started hearing about other teams across the group, NatWest included, small self-organizing teams working in sprints, working to this Agile methodology. And we started hearing the bank's executives talk about it, which was really positive. And then we heard that the governance department, famous for its independent reviews behind closed doors, were working on an Agile framework as well. And we realized at that point that we hadn't, whilst we felt defeated before and we thought we'd failed in this sort of Agile implementation, we'd only really got to the end of the first chapter. So in our journey towards Agile, really we picked up a flat tire, needed to change the wheel and get back on the road to continue the journey. And that's what we've done. And so some of the things we've learned along the way are that that people actually respond really well to some of the parts of the Agile implementation, Scrum, ceremonies, whatever you want to call them. So people enjoyed the stand-ups. Once they found time, and if you set it at about 10 o'clock, then you get all the younger parents or the party goes from the night before, or people who've got to have more important meetings at between 8 and 10, they can all come along. Everybody starts to appreciate the fact that you're getting through the updates quickly and you're not allowing people to run on. And people are also really pleased to be able to help their colleagues unblock problems. We found that using Jira was a success. We found the retrospectives really powerful because you get feedback on how everything is going on a regular basis. And yeah, so those are the key points. But I mean, some learnings we found as well was that agile implementation can be really hard if it's not broadly planned out, including every part, including the business, including lots of different areas like the previous two speakers had talked about. Then you have to go through the existing body of work at the same time. So you have to complete all your governance documentation whilst also trying to bring Agile on the way. It feels like you're doing two jobs sometimes. So therefore, we think that there's a bit of a, Agile in the short term in that sort of environment has a bit of a niche. So you can use it for, you can use it for a design activity or a build and test activity. But in the short term, it probably fits well within a traditional structure, beginning to end project, and then a series of iterations. We found a couple of other final things that we found was that co-location isn't that important for internal teams. So we have a team in Zurich and a team in London. And actually, we worked really well, and we still work really well with that distance. The modern technology, Jira included, really helps to break down those barriers. But with external teams, it's really important because co-location allows you to cross that sort of cultural and organizational divide that you might not be able to do otherwise. And I think our biggest eye-opener was that, or our most important learning, was that we work in a stakeholder environment. Everybody's got a different view, and a lot of those people are quite senior. And so the important person to have in the room and to delegate the role to properly is the product owner. You need somebody who's empowered. You need somebody who's strong enough to manage stakeholders, to push back on them, to bring them on the journey with you. We're very fortunate to have that. Yeah, that would be one of our key learnings. Anyway, that's all from me. Thank you for listening, especially after the beer and the pizza's all gone. Yeah, I'll hand back over to Phil. Thank you.